Learning from mistakes, the story of an uncle, a teenager, and the power of discipline. I never imagined a family situation could test me so intensely. At first, everything seemed simple. I just wanted to get closer to my nephew Vinicius, share moments of fun, and show him that life could be enjoyable without resorting to bad behavior. He was 14, a complicated age, full of discoveries, but also of testing limits. I, Laert, then 34, worked hard, sought stability and balance, but above all, I wanted to be someone my family could trust. I bought games, took him to the movies, tried to create genuine bonds. The routine was intense, but to a certain extent, enjoyable. I believed that emotional connection could solve any problem. I first realized something was wrong when my money started disappearing from my wallet. At first, I thought it was forgetfulness, disorganization on my part, or expenses I couldn't remember. But the feeling of frustration grew as I noticed patterns, small amounts disappearing repeatedly, without explanation, always when Vinicius was nearby. Attempts to talk to him resulted in evasive answers, nervous laughter, or complete silence. The situation forced me to face the painful possibility that my attempts to create a connection might not have been enough. I discovered that Vinicius was going further, going through his parents' belongings, stealing items from stores, and even involving colleagues like Lucas and Bruno in schemes he himself called business. Each new discovery made me more uneasy. As an adult, I felt I should intervene, but always in a fair manner, without overdoing it. However, the frustration of seeing that my methods, such as conversations, warnings, and advice, weren't working, left me with a constant dilemma. How far could I go without damaging the family bond, while ensuring he understood the gravity of what he was doing? The feeling of being alone in this mission grew with each passing day, and I realized I needed outside guidance. I spoke with Rafaela, my best friend, confidant, and the person I've always trusted to organize my thoughts. She helped me see that sometimes firmness needed to come before understanding, that blind tolerance could be more harmful than beneficial. Rafaela encouraged me to think of creative solutions, but always with clear boundaries, and to consider professional help to deal with the legal aspects if necessary. I began to realize that my desire to protect Vinicius couldn't override the need to teach responsibility and consequences. It was then, after nights pondering what might really get Vinicius's attention, that I decided to set a trap. I put counterfeit money in my wallet, knowing that this would be the most direct way to confront the problem without harming anyone physically, but with consequences serious enough for him to understand the impact of his actions. I knew this wasn't simple. Involving legal aspects meant consulting someone like Dr. Otavio, a trusted lawyer, to understand the limits and avoid legal complications. The tension grew with each step, because this decision carried enormous emotional risk. I could be betraying his trust, or on the other hand, it could be the only way to show that actions have real consequences. The day it all happened was marked by an almost palpable tension. I could feel my heart racing, and at every moment it seemed as if Vinicius might discover my plan before time. I remember doubting myself. Was I being too extreme? But at the same time, I knew that any hesitation would prolong the cycle of harmful behavior and could affect not only him, but the entire family dynamic. The moment of being caught was surreal. Vinicius, with a mix of confidence and audacity typical of his age, tried to use the counterfeit money at a store near his home. Adrenaline and guilt mingled in a unique and disconcerting sensation. I knew the outcome could change everything, and there was no going back. When the store clerk identified the counterfeit money, the shock was instantaneous. Vinicius was arrested, and the initial feeling of helplessness gave way to a mix of relief and fear. I knew the situation now required more than words. There were real legal consequences, not just family ones. The consultation with Dr. Ottavio became essential to understanding how the action could be framed and how I could protect myself without harming my nephew beyond what was necessary. Every detail needed to be calculated, every reaction controlled, because I knew that any emotional decision could worsen the situation. It was a brutal learning experience about responsibility, boundaries, and the complexity of raising a teenager amid parental permissiveness and poor choices. In the following days, the atmosphere at home changed completely. Gustavo and Helena finally had to face reality. Vinicius wasn't just harming me, he was also stealing from them and from stores, and involving other colleagues in his petty schemes. The discovery was painful for everyone. As an uncle and a key figure, I felt responsible not only for the arrest, but also for guiding the family through the consequences. The initial feeling of helplessness turned into determination. I needed to help rebuild trust and guide Vinicius to understand the true impact of his actions, without destroying bonds that could still be saved. In the midst of this turmoil, I felt my own patience and limits being tested like never before. Every conversation with Vinicius, every reaction he made when he realized the gravity of the situation, required a firm yet sensitive approach. I needed to balance discipline with empathy, avoiding letting frustration turn into anger that could further damage the bond I was struggling to maintain. Rafaela remained my emotional safe haven, offering advice and encouragement when I felt on the brink of despair. I realized that oftentimes acting alone would be insufficient. External support and guidance were essential to dealing with complex issues of adolescent behavior and family responsibilities. The process of overcoming wasn't limited to dealing with the incident itself, but also addressing the structural flaws in Vinicius's upbringing and education. I needed to accept that, despite my good intentions, mere interaction and emotional closeness wouldn't be enough to shape his behavior. The situation required practical changes, clear rules, constant supervision, and most importantly, the acceptance that certain decisions should have real consequences. As the days passed, I realized the tension wasn't abating. Vinicius was dealing with guilt, but also anger, shame, and confusion, emotions typical of his age, but intensified by the gravity of the situation. I, Laert, needed to remain calm and be a reliable point of reference, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. My every move was watched. Every harsh or thoughtless word could destroy any progress we were trying to make. It was a constant pressure, and I admit there were times when I thought I might have overreacted, that my intervention had been too harsh. But the conviction that wrong actions require consequences kept me steadfast. Gradually, Gustavo and Helena began to take a more active role. Their initial resistance gave way to difficult conversations, confrontations with reality, and a reorganization of the way they raised Vinicius. I realized that often, being an agent of change involves being willing to take responsibility, even when we're not the biological parents. It was a painful but essential lesson. Often, love isn't just comfort and presence, but firmness and consistency, even when it hurts. My own life transformed. Patience, understanding the consequences, and the ability to act ethically and clearly became my most valuable tools. Each obstacle overcome, each step taken, seemed to open a glimmer of hope for Vinicius's future. The process of rebuilding trust was gradual and nuanced. Vinicius began to acknowledge his mistakes, but not linearly or easily. There were setbacks, moments of frustration, and even attempts to hide small acts again. Each situation required emotional balance and practical intelligence. I needed to be present, not just to reprimand, but to guide, listen, and teach. I felt like I was about to give up, especially when I found myself repeating rules or confronting lies. But the awareness that abandoning the process would be more damaging than continuing gave me the strength to persist. I learned that true overcoming isn't instantaneous. It requires consistency, resilience, and a willingness to face one's own vulnerability. It was during a conversation in which Vinicius, for the first time, spoke honestly about his motivation for thefts that I realized the true impact of my efforts. He admitted feeling the need to assert himself among his peers and seek approval through wrongdoing. Hearing this broke my heart, but it also illuminated the path we needed to take, teaching him correct ways to deal with social pressure, self-esteem, and responsibility. I felt a mixture of pride and relief. Finally, genuine dialogue was happening, and inner change was beginning to emerge. It was proof that despite all the difficulties, the effort and strategy applied had paid off. The experience transformed me profoundly. I understood that my role in Vinicius's life was not limited to being a present uncle, but also a mentor, someone capable of guiding without suffocating, correcting without destroying, and loving even in the face of serious mistakes. My perspective on discipline, boundaries, and responsibility solidified, and I realized that overcoming challenges isn't just about dealing with external problems, but also about confronting one's own fear, doubt, and guilt. Each step toward regaining Vinicius's trust became a personal victory, and his every step forward directly reflected my own emotional development. Over the weeks, Vinicius began to show subtle but significant changes. He began to acknowledge when he was wrong, to genuinely apologize, and even to reconsider his choices in front of colleagues. Each small positive gesture was a reminder that patience and consistency paid off. I, Layert, learned to celebrate these moments, even if they seemed insignificant to outsiders. The transformation required constant attention and emotional effort, as any oversight could lead to relapses. I realized that true overcoming isn't just about correcting behaviors, but about cultivating awareness and responsibility, both in those learning and those mentoring. At the same time, my own limits were tested like never before. I needed to balance my role as an uncle and role model without overloading my personal and professional life. The stress was intense, and there were days when I felt like I couldn't handle all the responsibility. It was at that moment that I realized the importance of taking care of myself, seeking support from Rafaela and even professionals if necessary to maintain my emotional sanity. I understood that to guide someone, you need to be firm, but also healthy. This realization was a major turning point. Overcoming challenges doesn't just mean facing external challenges, but also recognizing and respecting your own limits. Gustavo and Helena began to consistently take on more responsibilities. Confronting Vinicius with clear rules, real consequences, and close monitoring had a transformative effect on the family dynamic. There were times when Vinicius almost gave up on changing, trying to return to his old habits. Each episode tested my patience and determination. I was afraid of failing, of not being able to convey the necessary message. But through each difficulty, I remembered the greater goal: to help him grow, to understand the gravity of his actions, and to learn to deal with choices. The process required discipline, but also empathy. The most significant turning point came when Vinicius decided, on his own initiative, to return items he had stolen and talk to Lucas and Bruno about stopping their petty schemes. This gesture was a milestone, demonstrating that learning didn't come solely from punishment, but from understanding real consequences and developing responsibility. I felt a mixture of pride, relief, and hope. Finally, I realized that my efforts to create clear boundaries, confront ethical dilemmas, and maintain firmness had paid off. More than that, I understood that overcoming obstacles is an ongoing process. It doesn't mean eliminating all problems, but learning to face them. Over time, my relationship with Vinicius transformed. Fear and distrust gave way to a healthier coexistence based on respect and clear boundaries. I realized that patience and firmness not only taught lessons, but also strengthened our bond. Vinicius began to open up about his feelings, challenges, and insecurities, showing that his problematic behavior was, in part, a way of expressing frustration and seeking attention. This understanding made me realize that overcoming adversity involves not only correcting mistakes, but also seeing beyond them, understanding causes, feelings, and needs. The experience taught me the importance of facing problems head-on, even when the solution requires courage, creativity, and a certain degree of discomfort. The counterfeit money scheme, although extreme, proved to be a learning tool that, if well managed, could yield positive results. With Dr. Ottavio's guidance, I understood the legal limits and was able to act without harming Vinicius beyond what was necessary. Each decision I made required reflection, patience, and self-awareness, demonstrating that overcoming challenges involves not only facing external challenges, but also dealing with doubts, fears, and internal ethical dilemmas. This lesson changed my perception of family responsibilities and how we can intervene in the lives of young people in difficult situations. Another significant lesson was realizing the importance of emotional support. Rafaela was crucial in this process, offering advice, listening, and encouragement, reminding me that to guide others, we need to be balanced and confident. Each conversation with her helped me reflect on my actions, emotions, and limits, becoming more aware of my stance and impact on Vinicius's life. I understood that overcoming challenges involves collaborative development. Even when we feel we must act alone, sharing experiences and seeking guidance strengthens our decisions and helps us deal with complex challenges without losing our emotional depth. Looking back today, I see that the experience with Vinicius not only changed his life, but profoundly transformed mine. I grew emotionally, learned to deal with conflict and guide others constructively, always keeping humanity and love at the center of my actions. I'm proud of the changes I've witnessed and of having found the strength to act with firmness, empathy, and determination, demonstrating that even in the face of complex family challenges, it's possible to teach, learn, and grow together. The most valuable lesson was realizing that overcoming doesn't eliminate pain, but transforms fear, guilt, and uncertainty into learning and emotional strengthening.